位贵宾、各位朋友，大家好，欢迎来到今日新闻所主办的论坛“台湾关键抉择：国防安全、能源政策与经济发展的现实考验”。这场活动呢，我们分为上下两场。上半场呢，我们谈的是政治与军事；下半场则是能源与国防安全。那上半场的主持人呢，由邱诗怡教授来代表。那为什么我们要办这一场论坛哦？尤其是上半场，那在这几年台湾面对的安全环境其实已经大幅改变，不管是地缘政治的这个紧张持续升温，或者是两岸的关系其实越来越加的紧张，那再加上新形态的这个战略性的武器呢，也重塑了战场的环境。所以我们要问一个很核心的问题：台湾在这样的环境之下，究竟要如何看待自身的安全条件？所以呢，这也是我们今天办这一场活动的目的。那首先呢，我要来介绍今天上半场的主持人，还有语坛的嘉宾。首先，我来介绍我们今天的主持人邱诗怡教授。邱教授呢是东海大学政治系教授，长期关注台湾政治、美国政治、两岸政策以及国际安全的策略。那他的学术呢兼具深度与广度，并且也相当受到学生的喜爱。我们欢迎邱诗怡教授。那因为现场有外国的来宾，所以我还会再用英文简单的介绍一次啊。Our moderator for this first session is Professor Albert Chu. Professor Chu is a leading scholar on Taiwan and American politics, and we welcome Professor Chu. 接下来为大家介绍今天的语坛来宾。第一位，他是美国民主防卫基金会网络与技术创新中心资深主任 Mark Montgomery。Mark 长期深耕网络安全、关键基础设施防护与印太战略议题，是美国政界与学界相当受到重视的战略声音。Our first panelist is Mr. Mark Montgomery.He is a senior director of the Center on Cyber and Technology Innovation at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Mark is a leading expert on cybersecurity, critical infrastructure protection, and Indo-Pacific security strategy. We are honored to have him with us. Welcome. 第二位是美国哈德逊研究所资深研究员 Michael Sobolik。Michael 专注于美中竞争、印太地区秩序与美国对台政策，长期提供美国政府重要的政策建议。Next, please welcome Mr. Michael Sobolik, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute. Michael focuses on U.S.-China competition, Indo-Pacific order, and U.S. policy toward Taiwan. Welcome. 第三位是我们的重量级嘉宾，他是前立法委员、现任美国哈德逊研究所资深研究员许毓仁。许毓仁长期推动台湾的科技创新政策，也积极在国际舞台上为台湾发声，是连接台湾与华府之间非常重要的桥梁。欢迎毓仁哥。Our third panelist is Mr. Jason Xu.Former legislator of Taiwan's parliament and senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, Jason has been a tireless advocate for Taiwan's digital innovation and a key bridge between Taipei and Washington, D.C. 第四位是国防安全研究院国防战略与资源研究所研究员兼所长苏子云，他对台湾的国防改革与军事战略有深入而系统性的研究。欢迎苏子云。Our fourth panelist is Dr. Su Ziyun. Dr. Su is one of Taiwan's leading experts on defense policy and military strategy. Please welcome Dr. Su. And 最后为大家介绍我们的第五位语坛人，他是中华战略暨兵棋研究协会理事长黄介正教授。黄教授长期深耕两岸关系与国际战略研究，是台湾战略学界非常重要的声音。我们欢迎他。Our final panelist for this session is Dr. Alexander Huang. Alexander is a distinguished scholar on cross-strait relations. Taiwan-U.S. Ties and Strategic Studies. Welcome. 那到现在为止呢，我已经把主持人以及来宾全部都介绍完毕，我们的所有来宾也已经全部就位。接下来我就将舞台交给我们今天上半场的主持人邱时宜教授，请邱教授带领大家展开今天的精彩讨论。Professor Chu, the floor is yours.
Okay. Right. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Albert Cho. I am from Donghai University in Taichung, a professor of political science. You know, like in the afternoon of Taipei, in this April, it's quite hot in here. I hope you guys, are, especially coming far from DC, will get used to it. Okay, I think today my duty here, I mean, first of all, of course, it's my great honor to serve as the moderator for this session. And this panel, actually, the very first panel, focuses on politics and military. Okay. And we have 5 panelists, as Lin Yu just introduced each of them to the audience in the room. So my task got very simple and half-fast is that I'm going to keep the discussion engaging, interactive, and also most importantly on time. Okay, I think each of the panelists will have about 10 minutes in the first round of the talk, and because into the second round, we will have more interaction between panelists. Okay, let me kind of have a little opening before I over the microphone to the next speaker, is that I'm going to talk about a little bit about the backdrop of recent developments, including several dimensions, because all of the panelists is going to cover or touch upon each of them. The first one is the evolving U.S.-China-Taiwan relations following the Zheng Liwen and Xi Jinping meeting, which is quite overheated recently in Taiwan. The second is also very important, is the NT 1.25 trillion Special Defense Budget Act. That's on the table right now in the legislative yuan. The third one is the future of AI-driven warfare and Taiwan's capabilities in this domain. And the fourth one is increases in the defense investment in general in Taiwan. And the final one is Taiwan's role and strategic position. Okay, we will structure our discussion around several key themes. The first theme is about the rising defense budgets. The strategic logic behind Taiwan's recent arms purchases from the United States has been a norm and pattern out there, but is any change or shift we have been witnessing in recent time? Taiwan defense budget and the NT 1.25 trillion Special Defense Act, I mean, that's the ruling party's version. Of course, we have different versions from different parties from the opposition party. And the third one is arms procurement versus indigenous defense industry developments. And we also wonder what Taiwan lacks most right now. Is it weapons, strategic clarity, or societal resilience? And of the first theme, the final question is the purpose of arms purchases. Deterrence, preventing war, or endurance, which is prolonging resistance. And the second theme we're going to discuss is Taiwan a US partner or a bargaining chip? The credibility of security commitments. We have also several questions to propose in this domain. The first one is what aspects of US commitments to Taiwan is most credible? Is it arms sales, intelligence sharing, political signaling, or alliance constraints? And we also wonder how Taiwan can enhance its own strategic value rather than passively waiting for supports. And will regional countries view Taiwan as a partner worth defending collectively? And we also wonder, is Taiwan overly reliant on US security commitments? If US policy shifts, does Taiwan have a contingency plans, which is plan B? For Taiwan, is a greater risk pressure from China or overdependence on external commitments? That's the final question of the second theme. As far as the third theme, we would talk about after the Xi Jinping Zheng Liwen's meeting, how much agency does Taiwan still have? We wonder, has the situation in the Taiwan Strait de-escalated, or is Beijing shifting alternative forms of pressure? Our panelists might also want to address some idea on is US-Taiwan-China relations, does Taiwan now have more negotiating space, or is it more vulnerable to external repositioning? And final question we would like to ask is that amid simultaneous dialogue, military pressure, and geopolitical competition, what are Taiwan's core security and lies? The final theme is actually coming back to the societal responsibility or resilience, what have you, in Taiwan, is the civil preparedness and societal resilience. The first question of this theme is, especially for me, given limited resources, what should Taiwan prioritize its investments? And the second question is, does Taiwanese society have sufficient wartime response capacity? And finally, among civil defense, information literacy, and basic emergency preparation, what is most urgent? Okay, that's actually a laundry list of questions, a lot to cover. So each of the panelists, you don't need to answer all of them, but you can selectively kind of focus on some while overlook others, which is your flexibility. Anyway, I'm gonna conclude. I'm gonna just stop here, and I over the floor to Mark. So are you going to be the next one, according to the list?
Thank you very much. Very honored to be here. Thank you for setting it up. Jason, really appreciate this opportunity. I think you asked a question up front. I'm going to go ahead and answer that one first. What's more important, weapons, strategic clarity, or societal resilience? The answer to that is yes. I mean, it's all three. You can't limit that in any singular way, and you have to work hard on all three of those. I'm going to talk about two aspects. And I answer two or three of the questions you had, not all 7 or 8. But I'm going to talk about a long-term issue and a short-term issue. The long-term issue is interoperability. Our forces, when we look at this as a military problem, our forces need to be more interoperable. But this has a significant political aspect to it. So it's a perfect point for discussion here. Just to explain interoperability to you, militaries can... When the United States fights alongside a military, you can be deconflicted from us, which means the lowest level. We don't really care what you do, just stay away from us. The next level is coordinated, where we you go one way, I'll go the other at the same time, things will go okay. So deconflicted, coordinated. The third one's integrated. That's where we integrate our forces together and work well. And then finally, there's unified. That's where we command each other's forces. If you look around Asia, you can see examples of all four. We and the Koreans are unified and a United Nations command. We and the Japanese are integrated, and we worked for 15 years to become integrated. It took a long time. We and the Philippines are coordinated. But we in Taiwan, the U.S. military and the Taiwan military, are just deconflicted, the lowest level. But the irony is, the two militaries in that whole group that might fight a high-end adversary together, the PLA, are the U.S. and Taiwan. So it's completely unacceptable that we are only deconflicted. And much of the blame is a political blame that resides with the United States. But some of it, there are things Taiwan can do to make this better, and I'll explain it to you this way. Interoperability is made up of technology, processes, and people. The technology, you kind of heard of these things, like do we buy communications devices, command and control devices, so our weapons can talk to each other? Do we have very similar weapon systems? Some of that's happening, the purchase of the weapon systems, but the actual interoperability, very low, unacceptably low. We sell systems to Taiwan that don't talk to the American equivalents. We don't have the cryptography properly exchanged. That's a problem. The second part is processes. You do that during exercises. Well, in 1979, we cold turkey, we say in America, but we stopped completely all exercises with the Taiwan armed forces. And I mean, we had done aggressive exercises in 1978. I mean, we just stopped. As many of you know, we'd had anywhere from 5 to 30,000 troops stationed here over the previous 30 years before then. We went cold turkey. And that we finally, because our Congress insisted on it, began exercises again in 2024 after 45 years. Not surprisingly, no one's left from the Taiwan Army, armed forces who'd worked with us before, so we have a lot of work to do in that. And the third part's people. You have to have people who are we have to have the proper level of exchange of people. And this is a two-part thing. We have to have many more Taiwan military officers go to mid-level training in the United States. It's through a system called IMET, International Military Education and Training. It needs to be wide open for Taiwan. But the other part of it is senior leader engagement. When I was an active duty admiral, I was not allowed to come here. Active duty generals can't come here. The Secretary of Defense can't come here. The president apparently can't come here. I think he can change that if he wants, but the vice president, the secretary of this, the secretary of that. That's insane. How do you work with a country, get ready to fight, work together, be partners and allies together, unless you meet together and talk together? This is an insane American policy driven by an inordinate fear of China. We had lots of things you can't do with Iran that we all believed till about 45 days ago. That stuff's gone. And a lot of these ridiculous self-constraints, China does not constrain itself at all. I mean, over the last week, they built a barrier around Scarborough Reef. We act as if they can do whatever they want, and we self-limit for fear of provoking them. This fear of provocation is counterproductive. We have to fix technology, policy, processes, and then personnel, both exchanges and policy. If we fix all three of those, we'll get interoperable. And since I'm on a roll, I'll keep going. I'll tell you that, in my mind, and this is directed at your budget fight right now, the kind of stuff you need to buy to be interoperable is in DCS, not just FMS. And the work by the LY to try to separate those two does us no favors. You need DCS, and you need it now. If you don't like a DCS program because you think it's biased towards somebody who knows somebody in a party, go after the one program. Don't kill DCS. That is fundamentally counterproductive and foolish, and it will weaken Taiwan and America's interoperability and ability to fight. We now improve our military through software-based engineering improvements in our weapon systems. That's inherently going to be in DCS products like unmanned aerial and unmanned surface vessels. Do not break up the FMS and DCS. Push that through, which gets to my final point, one short-term thing. I don't know if you know this, but Taiwan's having a national election next month. And it's on May 14th, and only 2 people are voting. And their names are Xi and Trump. And you want to win that damn election. And if you want to win that election, you better look like a model ally to the United States. And here's what a model ally looks like. A model ally invests in America. Check. Taiwan's got a $500 billion investment program coming. A model ally says, I'll confront an adversary with you. China. Check. You're alongside us. A model ally backstops our economy with semiconductors, not just today, but as we look at an AI-based future. Taiwan is an integral part of American prosperity. Check. Taiwan, and a model ally spends 3.5% on defense. Now that's your problem. If you don't have that defense budget passed by the beginning of May, you're going to get voted on May 14th. And there's no good votes here. That vote is going to be about sacrificing some of the assurances we have with Taiwan right now. So it's up to all 3 parties to pass a budget, and a budget at 3.3, 3.4, 3.5% that supports FMS and DCS and is done and in the books by the beginning of May. Then it'll be check, 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 check. Taiwan's a model ally. Taiwan's not on the menu on the 14th and 15th, and the election goes well. So my best advice to you all is to get that stuff done now. So build your interoperability long term, get your defense budget done short term, and Taiwan's going to be a secure, vibrant democracy with a great economy and a free press and everything that the mainland China will regret that it doesn't have. Thank you very much.
the resilience of the Taiwan's society and also the safety of Taiwan society is based on how much muscle we have. I mean, that's very apparently to see. Okay, next one I'm gonna introduce, Michael.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Honored to join this distinguished panel. Thank you for moderating. Panelists, looking forward to the conversation. There are a few different questions that you raised at the outset that I want to address. Number one, is Taiwan a partner of the United States or a bargaining chip? The purpose of arms sales to deter or to be resilient in a conflict, and does Taiwan have any agency at all in all of these decisions that it faces? To begin with, I think it's important to step back and realize that America's interest in Taiwan is not one-dimensional. It's not even two-dimensional or three-dimensional. Taiwan matters and has mattered to the United States for decades and decades for a whole host of reasons. And I think this is one of the staying powers of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, as complicated as it is. If you go back to the 1970s, when Richard Nixon and Henry Kissinger first went to China, at the top of Nixon's to-do list was to find a way to get out of Vietnam quickly and gracefully. At the top of Mao Zedong's list was Taiwan. And all of those negotiations, those nascent negotiations that eventually crescendoed into the change of diplomatic recognition away from the Republic of China to the People's Republic of China, at the center of it, among many other things, was Taiwan. And when Congress recognized a number of the concessions and the position of the Nixon administration and forward, and then especially the Carter administration in 1978, Congress did what it did and passed the Taiwan Relations Act. And if you go and you read the TRA, it has been explicit as a matter of American policy ever since 1979 that not just the process of how the cross-strait situation is managed, not only do we care about the process, but we care about the substance of America's relationship with Taiwan. The foundation of that initially was strategic, because during World War II, it was abundantly clear to the military fighters and planners and the politicians of the United States that the island of Taiwan is incredibly strategic for the geographical position that it has on planet Earth. You see this in how American defense planners talk about Taiwan with the first island chain. If the PRC is ever to gain sovereignty over Taiwan, the entire equation of the Pacific Ocean and of America's ability to have the kind of power projection it needs credibly into this theater changes. Our position in Guam changes. Our position in the Pacific Island region in Micronesia changes if Taiwan falls to China. So for strategic reasons, your country and your country's future matters very deeply to us. But Taiwan has taken on a deeper meaning than just strategic and geopolitics. As Taiwan has blossomed into a democracy, there's a political kinship between our countries that we all cherish and has been a sticking point in a good way for a very long time. And then with economics, as Mark also mentioned, the investment of the Taiwanese economy into the American economy and the leadership of Taiwanese companies like TSMC for the next generation of technology in the 21st century, we cannot be prosperous as Americans in the AI age without Taiwan being secure. So for all of these reasons, the fundamentals of the U.S. relationship with Taiwan are strong and they are sound. The military element is the wild card here, and this is the one that Mark has just talked about, and I want to focus on this a little bit too, because the military element gets into this next question which you raised: what kind of agency does Taiwan have? And the good news for you is that you have a great deal of agency right now. Mark is right. When Donald Trump goes and meets with Xi Jinping will ask him almost assuredly to publicly oppose Taiwanese independence. He asked President Biden to do this, and he will almost assuredly ask the same thing of Donald Trump. And when Donald Trump is asked that, He's going to fall back on the briefing conversations that he has had beforehand, and I will associate myself with everything that Mark just said. It will come down to a great deal of the kind of military investments that Taiwan is making. Because President Trump, whatever you think of him, is incredibly consistent in that he expects America's partners to invest in their own security and to defend themselves credibly and to take their own security position seriously. We see this with Poland. We see this especially with Israel. The reason Donald Trump loves Israel is because it invests in its security and it fights to win. That is the linchpin among many different foundations of the U.S. and Israel, but that's a big part of it. The Israelis take their position and their own survival very seriously. If this defense budget is concluded and is negotiated favorably, and Taiwan can get to 3.5% before Donald Trump sits across the table with Xi Jinping, that is the agency that you need, and that is within your democracy's ability to secure. If you can do it before that meeting, I think the good news for Taiwan is going to be that you actually have a great deal of agency despite living in the shadow of the People's Republic of China. To the question that you asked about the purpose of these weapons, I think the United States, as a former congressional staffer, I worked for Senator Ted Cruz for 5 years on Taiwan issues and issues with the United States and China. I can say right now that at least for members of Congress, what they want to see is a Taiwan that is ready and prepared to fight asymmetrically, to be resilient, and to have domestic production capacity for critical platforms that they won't need to rely on outside partners in a conflict. They are looking for evidence that Taiwan is preparing to fight to survive in the opening days and weeks of a brutal conflict. And the United States' position and role is hopefully to deter that day from ever coming. And if we work together, I think there's a great deal of probability we can be successful. It comes down, I think, to this hinge, and I'll stop here. You have a great deal of agency. And I think this is lost, and this is what the Chinese Communist Party and what Xi Jinping does not want you to believe. It doesn't want anyone in the world to believe that Taiwan has agency. That is Xi Jinping's mission, to isolate Taiwan and to convince everybody that you can't do anything to secure your own political future. But the good news is that you can. If you can get this budget passed, you will reinforce the foundations of your relationship with America, and you will be, I think, in a very strong position. Thank you.
All right. You're 2 minutes short. You still have 2 minutes to go. Yeah, I mean, you still have 2 minutes to go, but it's okay. Yeah, we conclude early. All right. We apparently have two kind of representatives from the United States, and you kind of share light on your idea about this budget, defense budget, and your idea. I mean, that's very clear to us. But I think the matter is more about how instead of a yes or no. Of course, yes, right? But you know, how to reach up to that yes. Okay. The next speaker is going to be Jason, the former legislator of Taiwan, handsome and intelligent guy. All right, Jason, over to you.
各位好，很久没见了，而且很久没有在这种公开的场合，跟各位聊聊我最近在华府的一些感受。最近我常常针对军购、军售还有台美关税贸易公开的发言。为什么我想要站出来说话？其实是我到华府1年多之后，在智库工作，其实在第一线看到台湾的处境是多么的艰巨。那这个艰巨一部分来自于目前的国际局势，还有目前川普一个交易式的一个政治手法，还有面对中国的威胁，还有我们国内政治的一个纷扰不稳定。包含我前一阵子也到美国的国会作证。那在我的国会的证词里面，我提出说，针对国家安全议题，针对国防议题，我们应该要不分党派的站在同一阵线上，然后以国家利益作为最大的思考，然后共同来支持这个国防，还有军购预算。那今天 我自己也当过立法委员，所以我可以很负责任的讲说，在这个军购方面，它绝对有它的问题，但是它不是不能解决，但是我们必须要先厘清在急迫性上面的一个问题，还有目前来说，哪些问题可以解决，然后哪些问题是需要透过监督跟程序上，我们去把它好好的处理。首先我特别从华府的观点来看这件事，就是华府在看军购，其实不是一种交易，不是说我跟你买什么东西，然后你给我多少钱，他在看的是你台湾自我防卫的决心，还有你的伙伴关系是不是坚固。为什么美国重视台湾的军购，还有台湾在这个所谓印太第一岛链这个位置？当然美国有他自己的利益，但是当台湾作为美国在印太的盟友，他没有负担起自己责任的时候，台湾就变成了一个问题。那当台湾自己变成一个问题的时候，川普跟习近平见面的时候，就可能成为菜单上面的一个选项。所以我在这边要问各位的是说，台湾是要成为菜单上的一个选项，还是台湾要先做好降低所有不确定性的一个可能性？那我觉得我们应该选第二个。那军购美方在看的有2个关键，第一个就是台湾是否在乎自我防卫。你不能够对外讲一套，对内做一套。你到华府去说一套，到中国大陆去说一套，对台湾的岛内又是说一套。你这样子不一致的说法，还有你没有用真正的行动去 back up your words 的时候，华府看在眼里，是认为你是一个不可被信任的伙伴。当台湾任何的一个政党被冠上一个 unreliable partner 不可被信任伙伴的时候，你台湾整体的利益，还有台湾整体的安全，在印太地区就会被大幅降低。到时候真的台海出事的时候，台湾要靠自己。然后如果美方这边再认为台湾不够力的话，那中间这个延宕的时间不是我们能够负担得起的。那第二，在军购案卡关的时候，华府会认为我们把台湾内部政治的纷争变成是一个国际的议题，而且这国际议题变成是川普在他的眼中里面是一个 trouble maker。当我们的军购案不过的时候，是什么意思呢？习近平对川普有一个杠杆的效应，他可以拿台湾来杠杆美国。那这样的情况不是台湾在菜单上，这个菜都还没有端出来的时候，你就已经被卖掉了，而且你是自己被放到自己这个菜单里面，你都还不知道。所以这个决心不足的问题里面，在华府的这个眼中，它是比武器本身更大的一个危机。就是为什么这么多这些参议员，还有这些重要的一个美国的政治领袖出来讲话，这是一个非常重要的原因。第二，以现在我们台湾的国会结构，两党恶斗的一个结果，当国家安全跟国防预算被牺牲的时候，遭殃的是全台湾的人民。目前的台湾的反对党，在国会里面是多数，绝对有办法可以用立法工具来去监督这个军购预算，但是全面的杯葛会造成台湾整体防卫的削弱，还有让中国可以在他不断的进行施压的情况之下，在第一线的国军没办法有足够的武器去保卫我们的家园。而且现在目前所提出来的几个军购版本里面，无论是现在政院版的1兆2，或是国民党版的3800，或是这个民众党的4000，这个差距还有两边对于军购的需求跟整体防卫的概念，都是南辕北辙的一个想法。所以我在这边要尽快的呼吁朝野政党，这也是为什么我们这个礼拜来到台湾的一个原因，就是说在军购上尽快的有一个共识。因为当我们内部的不确定性形成外部的一个为安全的一个破口的时候，中国就可以利用它，而且我们时间正在缩短。刚刚 Mark 说5月14号正在进行一个全国性的选举，你们会觉得很好笑，说5月14号到底会有什么选举？ 其实就是只有习近平跟川普2个人在投票，而且他投的票就是决定台湾的命运。只是当台湾自己没有做好自己该做的时候，我们在这一个投票的场合，在这个场合里面，不确定性就会非常非常的高。然后第二就是说，我自己过去也在立法院服务过，我自己也知道说，跟中国大陆保持一个交流是一个重要性的。那目前国民党的做法是说，两岸要交流，要对话。那民进党的做法是所谓的以实力换取和平。那国民党的做法可能是所谓的以对话换取和平。但是这两者并不互相违背。就像罗斯福总统说的，你可以手拿着一根大棍子，但是轻声的说话。可是当你手上什么都没有的时候，你拿什么去跟人家谈判？当你的自我的国防的一个这个能力，自我的防卫能力完全的降低的时候，而且你还要依赖别人愿意卖你什么，你才愿意编预算的时候，你哪里有办法去跟对方谈什么样的一个和平？所以我觉得这个是一个非常重要的一个态度。第三，全世界的盟友都在看台湾怎么做。如果连我们自己台湾都不认真看待国防，都没有办法给第一线防卫、保卫我们家园的官兵最好的装备，而且最需要的装备的内容的话，我不知道为什么我们其他的盟友有责任来去协助台湾。那我也可以理解说，过去可能很多我们跟美国买的装备都没到货。这个我也跟 Mark 也聊过，跟几个美国的朋友都聊过，我们买的东西的确有延迟没到货的问题。过去10年，可能我们买了很多的军购的东西都还没到货。但是如果我们现在更不重视的话，我们可能连排队都排不上。各位知道，全世界烽火连天，现在光在伊朗战争一天消耗掉650枚的爱国者飞弹，然后上百架的无人机，然后现在我们有在行政院里面的版本的军购版本，有些是把无人机排除在外，有些是把我们自己的国防自主生产的部分排除在外。当我们没有那一些必要的这个自我防卫的装备的时候，我们恐怕连嚇阻的能力都没有。那这是一个非常非常大的一个问题。美中已经进入一个系统性的竞争，今天不会因为川普下台，美中就会回到过去所谓就是2个一起喝咖啡，然后两边一起坐下来就是当好朋友的阶段。这个竞争的持续性是系统性的，它不会因为共和党执政或者是民主党执政而有所改变。台湾很明显的变成了竞争的一个节点。成为这个竞争一个节点不是我们想要的，但是这个是历史的必然。我们今天走到这个地步，可能跟过去这个中美关系、跟台美关系，还有我们的第一岛链的这个战略位置有很大的因素。可是当我们已经走进去这个赛局的时候，当我们已经是一个竞争的节点的时候，我们就要尽一切的可能性去降低所有的variable， 就是所有的变因，我们应该把它降到最低。那其中一个最大的一个变因，就是我们自己的自我防卫的决心。如果我们这个变因让它形成一个最高的一个不确定性的话，那我们的敌人很容易的就来利用这样的一个不确定性来攻破我们。第三，川普是一个交易式的政治人物，对他来说，在他眼里没有所谓的价值，只有价格。但是你面对这样的一个政治人物的时候，你要用一个很务实的态度去跟他互动。当台湾被连军购或是台美贸易这些事情，我们内部都没有办法有一个统一的一个看法，或是一个实际的行动的时候，对川普来说，你台湾就是一个不上道的家伙，就是一个不上道的伙伴。因为我们跟你们签了这个约，但是不履行这个合约的时候，在川普来说，他根本不 care 台湾，他有可能会在习近平面前就答应了习近平任何的要求，因为对他来说，11月要到的期中选举更是一个更重要的议题，他必须要跟川普达成一个交易，对他来说是一个目前他内部一个最大的一个警讯。最后我想谈的就是说，中国不会因为 今天哪一党执政，就改变他对台湾的态度跟看法。如果是这样的话，我们今天不会就是继续有攻击绕台、灰色地带行动，或者是网络攻击跟骇客攻击这件事。我们要做好我们自己该做的。今天如果这个世界局势转变的时候，无论是转向这个更和缓的世界局势，或者是更多极的这个 multipolarity， 就是更多极式的这个世界局势的时候，我们都能够做到自己应该要做，而且面对我们的就是面对中国的时候，我们有最好的一个谈判的筹码。我们要做的事情就是避免这个误判的风险上升。那现在无论是我们国内的政治纷扰，或者是美中的局势，这个误判的风险都不断的在升高当中，而且这个是对于对外的战略讯号是模糊的，尤其盟友对于台湾的防卫决心，当对台湾自己都觉得你们不太确定你自己要不要自我防卫的时候，盟友也会问一句话说：那我们为什么要来保护你？那我觉得这个是一个非常重要的一件事。我最后就是简单还是提一下，目前我们这个5月14号川习会即将到来，我们面对的其实不只是一个军事的威胁，它是一个结构性的战略压力。那这个战略的压力是不只是在军购上面，我们要用行动去表现我们可以做到自我防卫的这样的一个决心，然后我们要在这个美中竞争的框架下释放一个一致的对外讯号，而且这些对外的讯号要从一个原本台湾说我们需要被保护，但是我们要进化到我们是可以在区域安全提供贡献，而且这个贡献不只是在军购上面，我们更能够在国防供应链，我们更能够在科技，我们更能够在 AI， 更能够在半导体上面提出我们的这样的一个贡献。最后我想提一件事情，就是美国会不会我们要问的问题不是美国会不会支持台湾？我们应该要问说，台湾是不是已经准备好成为一个值得被支持的一个盟友？谢谢。
Thank you, Jason. This panel is conducted in a bilingual format, even though you kind of sacrifice your time in translate what you said in English. But I guess because your target audience is the people in Taiwan. Anyway, so I think next one we'll like to welcome Professor Su Ziyun. He is an expert in national defense and also very focused on the research on military strategy of Taiwan.
Okay, thank you, host and distinguished guest. I will follow Jason. Yes, actually. Speak softly, however, with a big stick, means that you try to keep peace, you need dialogue and deterrence. It's two pillars, actually. I would like to say that to share my opinion with you today, really challenge Taiwan. Actually, everybody knows Taiwan right now faces a strong or serious military pressure outside, especially China. However, many people just focus on the risk of war in the Taiwan Strait. On the other hand, the really challenge, just my opinion, is inside Taiwan. Just because of the political culture. So, it's hard to say. 30 years ago, 1996, the first time Taiwan so-called presidential election directly. Those days, 30 years ago, China launched a so-called missile test toward Taiwan's vote. Under such pressure and under such a threat, Taiwanese people choose democracy. 30 years later, 2026, this year, I think Taiwan should re-choose our position. Actually, today, Taiwan is a mature democracy. And that important question, is about political system now support a long-term national security. You decide how many budget show you are willing to defend yourself, actually. Above all, first, I would like to say that we needed to clear Taiwan is never a so-called free rider. That's important. Taiwan is taking so-called responsibility to boost up our defense budget and try to improve the military structure and even the reserve force, whatever the Air Force or ground force or Navy or even a reserve force. And also developing so-called asymmetric warfare or capability. Mean that actually, I believe Michael and Mark know that so-called asymmetric warfare really is asymmetric cost. Use a low price, whatever the U.S. system. This action shows strong willing to defend ourselves. However, really difficult inside Taiwan is the so-called democratic process or system. You know that such a security issue often influenced by the election or the party competition, The long-term security issue well influenced by the short-term so-called political interest. Many democratic states have such a similar phenomenon. However, I think Taiwan right now is facing a really serious threat. Another challenge is the society lack of shared understanding in such issue. People may think differently. Without a common defense policy, it's also hard to create a sense about such a security issue or concept. Division inside society can weak in resistance. Whatever we so-called whole society resistance, however, such a division will weak such strengths. From a strategic point of view, extreme traits decide how urgent defense is. However, the political decides how long the defense lasts. History often clear warning, or sometimes it's a good lesson. In 1938, the Nazi Germany annexed Austria. They don't use really armed force, It's not happened at the middle line. And it's not a so-called military action. Germany, those days, used so-called political pressure and use the influence warfare or influence operation and support for some local group. It shaped so-called public opinion and create such a division inside Australia. So we can Australia from its region, actually. By the time when a military force was used, resistance had already been reduced. That such a case reminds us such something important. Security threats do not always begin so-called tanks or so-called missiles, you know. In other words, to destroy democracy, use democracy. That's for right now, for example, the freedom of express and to keep the balance of the national security is a dilemma right now. So for Taiwan, the lesson is very clear, I think. External pressure become more dangerous, and internal unity is weakened. That's why resilience is not only military, but also it is so-called political and social. I would like to say that therefore Taiwan future security depend on two things. One is the stronger our military force. Another one is a really political system. We should think it again and again. If we try to keep our lifestyle, freedom and democracy, we need the hard power to protect our system. Again, I would like to say Taiwan is not so-called a free rider. Right now, we just think about what our responsibility to contribute not only for our survival, but also for the common security of the democratic states. Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you for Professor Su. He actually raised a great point about the internal division within a open society like Taiwan. I mean, he talked about the historical example back in Germany, a long time ago. I think Taiwan, pretty much like Ukraine, also encountered this kind of challenges from time to time. Especially, we have the election to be held on a regular basis. Whenever that happens, like in the United States, will be a lot of disinformation campaign against Taiwan, and will be a lot of kind of propaganda against the ruling party, opposition party, and what have you. So I think this is a really daunting challenge. It's about the softer side of the society. But also, Director Su or Professor Su also mentioned hard power is also important, because I remember when Ma Ying-jeou and KMT was a ruling party, a while ago. They spent a lot of time and efforts in talking about the strength of soft power, but ever since Donald Trump came back, to Oval Office in 2020. 2024, people think about kind of the same story from different perspective. Now, hard power is a thing too. Okay, but anyway, we still want to have a balanced kind of perspective from different discussion. And the final one is also a good friend of mine, Alexander Huang, Professor Huang. He probably can offer different insights, kind of add up to our discussion.
Thank you, Albert. I want to thank Jason for this invitation, and also the group that you invited to spend more than a week in Taiwan. If you all don't care about Taiwan, don't care about our security, you won't be here. And I understand. And this is, when you are sitting here, you are like, traveling in Washington and almost every quarter in the United States, you will hear the same voice, that there are people care about Taiwan's defense, and they recommend Taiwan to do A and B and C. So, I first landed in Washington, D.C. exactly 40 years ago. And I got friends and who will talk straight to me, to my face. And I also got, a lot of buddies that I can trust in my life. Taiwan, however, we need to face the two powers. China, at least encircled Taiwan for the past 4 years, nonstop, normalized Joint Combat Readiness Patrol, But we went to movie theaters, karaoke, regularly. That's our resilience, very romantic resilience that we don't care about PLA. But we got a lot of friends who worry about Taiwan, that Taiwan does not have necessary understanding of the situation that we are facing in. Also, 40 years ago, as a young graduate student in Washington, D.C., I saw that senior flag officers, general officers, as a delegation went to the United States and participated in the Armed Sales Annual Conference. Most of the time, with a lot of restrictions, not terribly successful. This is not U.S. policy, but different political and international situation. So now, to me, a person who cares about our uniformed service, who wanted to make our military strong, I believe the challenge that we face by Trump 2.0 or the consecutive, government in the past 10 years in the United States. Personally, I see this as a golden opportunity to procure, to purchase, to import, to possess, acquire the technology, the systems that we always want that we couldn't get 40 years ago because of political sensitivities. When I was a young Foreign Service officer, everything, when something been turned down, I was told that we cannot hurt the feelings of 1.4 billion people. But today, a lot of people do not care whether we hurt the feelings of 1.4 billion people today. So there are opportunities purely from the military perspective that we can work together to get what we were refused or prohibited to acquire. As long as we have the determination, as long as we wanted to commit our resources, there is a higher probability that we can get the tech transfer, a loosened export control, that we can help our own military force to grow, to build up. However, I want to also say that personally, because I care about the uniformed services, when I saw the special defense budget package, 1.25 trillion NT dollars, the first thing is not the number, whether it matched GDP 3%, 3.5%. The first thing came to my mind as a professor. I wanted to know that how much in that 1.25 trillion are committed as an investment in our uniform service to our women and men in uniform. Why? Because we got manpower problems. Since 4 years ago, I went to the United States 15 times in the past 3.5 years. I pound the table and say, where are my F-16? We cannot delay, please. Where are our jets? But since 2.5 years ago, I stopped complaining about the backlog delivery. Why? Because I saw our own problems of manpower shortage. More than 20,000 volunteer force drop out in the past 3.5 years, even pay the fine to leave the uniform. And so I would think if we have a manpower shortage today, when we get all the system delivered, so-called late delivery systems, all in place in Taiwan, how many more personnel I need? Where do I get them? And when we committed another 1.25, all hardware, all systems, Of course, including some education and training. Where do I get our people? So I have long advocated that we wanted to spend our resources. We can commit our budget, financial resources, to strengthen our capability, war-fighting capability. It's not about system only, it's about the capability and the capacity. So I would urge that, I don't think Washington said if you cut 0.1%, then we do not commit your security. I don't think so. But we need to be able to explain to our American interlocutors and say, what's our problem? What's the problem we face? Investment in weapon systems, future warfare requirement. Yes, we need to do that. The system that we see in the war in Iran today may not be the system 8 years later. So do we have some flexibility in that 1.25, let's say 10%, for future improvement? The same system, same capability, but amendable. Can we do that? And how much we invest in our own volunteer force? We got a low recruitment rate. We got a very low retention rate today. That's our own problem if we want to defend this land. The United States cannot help us to address the manpower issue. Do we spend money on our own service people? Yes or no? So that's the challenge. Overall, I want to say that our people, the majority of Taiwanese people, I think that we are willing to commit resources. We are willing to spend money to increase our security, to enhance our warfighting capability, not by percentage, not by numbers, but by capacity and capability. So I blame myself. If we don't know how to defend ourselves, if we do not have a defensive strategy and only go to Washington and say, hey, bro, what should I do? What can I buy? Then we don't get respect at all. So we need to figure out. So conversation is very important. A divided Taiwan cannot win the support and trust from the United States. But if we do not want to divide our own society, we need to have the political parties, the politicians who are willing to work together, talk together. But in the past 18 months, 2 years, politicians are telling the voters either my way or the highway. I do not bend. If you do not listen to me, you don't love Taiwan. You work for Xi Jinping. It's not that way. Democracy must provide a room for conversation, for meaningful professional debate. If I withhold the information, I say, oh, you don't know. Oh, this is, too sensitive. I cannot tell you, but just vote for me, okay? And I cannot tell you. That's not statecraft. We are all senior enough to understand the problem. Where are the problems? But we need to address the issue. I know Washington. I know, especially at this moment, Donald Trump doesn't care what I say or whether we have a conversation between political parties. He wants to see the numbers, right? And so I said we must address the image issue, the Washington perspective. We need to keep in mind if we want to have a sustainable U.S.-Taiwan collaboration, if we want to continue to strengthen our military with American assistance, we need to show our sincerity and show our commitment. The commitment is not only the number. The commitment is the commitment that we reform our own military. We also spend resources to address the manpower issue. That's what we need to do. That's also a professional commitment to the United States. That's how we show our American interlocutors that we are determined to strengthen our power. Finally, I want to say, do not question the honesty of our American friends today in this room. They come here to care about our future. You know, their words may be interpreted as numbers, as the atmosphere in Washington, D.C. But I want to say that whenever I hear the advice, I appreciate that. And I come back and try to translate a workable agenda in this town and try to make it happen. It's difficult. Democracy is damn difficult for everyone. But we gotta defend our own homeland. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alexander. We actually still have a little bit of time left, but I think we better quick move into the second round of the interaction. And Alexander and also Jason also, both of them mentioned the kind of the suspicion or problem of the delay in the arms procurement. Maybe Mark or Michael, you might want to respond to that part of the question. And also you can raise up your questions to others.
Are you talking about FMS delays? Yeah, okay, so here's what I'll tell you. Foreign military sales, how we sell weapons, true weapons like fighter planes or ships or something to foreign countries. The good news is we treat everyone the same. The bad news is that we suck for everyone. So that means foreign military sales are not going to get better fast. There will be the Harpoon missiles, which should realistically have been able to be delivered in 2 or 3 years, are going to take the full 6 to 7 years from when originally, if one put on contract. And that is the problem with the American system. Over time, we may fix it, but we're not going to fix it now. And we have tried our hardest to try to prioritize Taiwan, and it does not appear to work effectively that way. If you get in the middle of a war, then somehow magically we could do it. And we saw that with Ukraine under the Biden administration. But that is not going to fix itself in a non-kinetic environment, in a non-actual warfighting environment. I will tell you that DCS, direct commercial sales, are much faster. They are from a limited list of systems, right? There's a list that's FMS and then everything else that's not. I think a lot of software-driven changes can come through DCS, but not for a very particular FMS-like system. So I would recommend highly to try to do as much direct commercial sales purchases, and I would recommend that you get your budgets approved as soon as possible, so that you can get your FMS on order and start experiencing the delay. But that is a problem. And what worries me is when we go to eventually Taiwan will be spending 5% on foreign military sales, 5% on defense. I think probably by 2030 or 2031, I don't care who's president of Taiwan at that point. And when you're spending 5%, whatever problem you have with FMS now is going to be tripled or quadrupled. It'll be 3 because I don't think another country's popping out of the sofa cushion and going to say that they're going to sell weapons to Taiwan. So it's just going to be the United States. And there are limits to your own defense industrial base because you only have one customer, yourself. So you're not going to start an F-16 program on your own, things like that. So my point on this is we have to work on this. It's not going to be great. It can't be an excuse for why you don't do things. I'm telling you right now it sucks. And I'm telling you right now when you have 4 times as much, 4 or 5 years from now, it's going to suck 4 times as much. And you just got to order the stuff and get it moving. That's the key to this. It's to stop worrying about it. Just like the defense budget. You've had 6 or 7 months. That shit's over. You have to have a defense budget in the next 2 weeks, and it needs to be at a number that President Trump recognizes as an appropriate contribution from a model ally. And so I don't care what the fight is about anymore. You've had your time. You're a democracy. You get your time. But you now have, there is a deadline, and it is fast approaching. And I don't care how smart or wise the arguments are at this point. It is time to deliver on a defense budget. And if you don't, you'll be held accountable by one of the most accountability-driven people I've ever met in terms of president. Some might say retributional. I'll just say accountable. But he will hold you accountable, and you'll go from being off the menu on May 14th and 15th to on the menu on May 14th and 15th. So get the damn budget done.
I'll add to what Mark said by talking about Congress for a brief moment. There was just a few days ago a bipartisan congressional delegation that came to Taiwan. They sent a joint letter advocating urgently and earnestly for the legislature here, the legislative yuan, to pass the defense budget. And I want to emphasize that the urgency from Washington is not only coming from President Trump, it is coming from Congress. Congress has been Taiwan's best friend in Washington, D.C. for decades now. Presidents and administrations tend to be the source of consternation in U.S.-Taiwan relations because presidents are managing the China portfolio, and that inevitably will overshadow Taiwan, and Congress has always been there in a bipartisan way to step in and advocate for Taiwan's interests, for Taiwan's friendship with America, for why Taiwan matters. And what is happening right now is concerning to me as a friend of Taiwan, all of us here on this trip, because something that has not happened to my memory is members of Congress, very influential members of Congress, friends of Taiwan, like Roger Wicker, who is the chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Dan Sullivan, longtime friend of Taiwan, openly raising direct concerns publicly and pointedly about this defense budget and how it's not getting done. And I want to emphasize this. Washington is unified, not just in our concern for a delay for a budget, they're concerned because of a mutual affection and kinship with Taiwan. So what is different, though, and I want to emphasize this, what is different is members of Congress wading into the domestic debate in Taiwan right now. Members of Congress, again, Mark and I both used to work on the Hill. This has not been done quite intentionally because we're both democracies, and as a democracy, we have to respect each other's process. But Mark is right. The deadline is coming, and it is urgent. So members of Congress are beginning to raise very pointed concerns. And I will also say this briefly. When the party chair of the KMT went to China and met with Xi Jinping before meeting with officials from Washington, D.C. and America, that raised significant concerns for members of Congress. And they're waiting and hoping that this defense budget debate can get resolved quickly, because what they want to see urgent evidence of is a Taiwan that is not only trying to manage a peaceful diplomatic process with a neighbor that is untrustworthy and aggressive and that we do not trust. They want to see evidence that all parties in the legislative yuan and all elected members here prize the United States and are ready and willing to work with them and to show themselves, as Mark said, as a model ally. So I just want to emphasize, Congress is concerned. There is not a division between President Trump and Capitol Hill. They're unified in this, and we are hopeful for all the reasons that we have said that this can get concluded quickly and before the president's trip to China coming up soon.
All right. Any follow-up questions? For sure that we want to see the passage, to be done as quick as possible. But obviously there are different versions. From a personal perspective, I wonder what version. You have this KMT version. The proposal, which is like 900 billion, and the ruling party's version is like 1.25 trillion. So I'm not sure, even though I personally, I learned that from some news report about the Americans' DC's attitudes towards different versions. But I wonder, what kind of version you guys are talking about? The defense budgets.
I said a couple times here. The one with DCS in it, which is going to be the 1.25 trillion. Okay. I would not get rid of that. Look, there's things in the KMT budget I think are impressive. I think that probably you should pay your soldiers more. I will say we've increased the pay for our soldiers in the last 3 years by 37%. Now, we do it different. I do have a problem with the KMTs across the board. That's not how you pay, that's not how you target pay to soldiers. It needs to be by rank, by officer enlisted, and you tend to do higher pay raises for the junior enlisted, but you target when people are coming out and leaving the military, right? 30% is just kind of like throwing cash at a problem. Targeted pay raise, like the U.S. military is very clear. This year, there was like, I want to say last year, there's like 18% for junior enlisted, 14% for mid-grade enlisted, 17% for junior officers, 12% for, it's targeted. You don't, there's not the same problem everywhere all at once, right? There's targeted. And so I think a mature, a well thought out pay raise for the armed forces is appropriate, but it has to be done in a thoughtful way that targets the right things. And so I'm for it, but it needs qualification. Now, we're near the end game. Right now, I'm for the budget, the $1.25 trillion budget that's on the table. Get it done. Here's the good news. We're going to be back in about 4 months saying, where's your 4% defense budget? And you can put all this other stuff in the 4% defense budget. And then we'll be back 18 months from now saying, where's your 4.5% defense budget? And then we'll be back here 30 months from now saying, where's your 5% defense budget? We're not done. China is 22 times your size in GDP, right? Even though you're growing at 7% a year, you're not going to catch them anytime this century, right? So with that in mind, you're going to have to raise your defense spending to 5%. By the way, who's like Taiwan? Israel is like Taiwan, facing Iran and all the other enemies. Their defense spending 6.5%, 6 to 6.5%. Who's facing Russia? Poland, 5%. Estonia, 5.3%. Latvia, 5.2%. Lithuania, 5.4%. They're all at 5% and above. Everyone who has a mean, nasty, authoritarian neighbor who wants to take something of yours is paying about 5% or more. You're going to be paying about 5% or more, and we're going to be that. You're going to be our model ally, and we're going to be your kick-ass partner. But that only gets done when you get up there. So don't worry about this 3.5%. Get the stuff done, and then refight this personnel budget with the 4% one. But I would come in with a more nuanced personnel budget. But I believe the KMT has identified an appropriate issue about personnel pay. But it needs to be done in a very thoughtful way that targets the right pay periods. But I'm excited about it. But 1.25 trillion, you need the DCS. Let's get her done. You don't have a lot of time. You have 10 days.
Directly first and Jason second. Because he raised his hand first.
I just want to share my opinion. Actually, democracy is everything, just like air, sunny for ourselves. However, I hope that democracy needs an so-called wisdom, priority. We should need survival when we face enemy. Second, number is not an issue actually. I do believe our friend from Washington is not care about how many budget. It's just a signal, very, very important. For example, the so-called special or extra budget about $40 billion a year, average each year just 5 billion US dollars. However, on the other hand, the War Department every year about $1 trillion. So it just show our willing to defend ourselves. The third, after the 2016, there are more than about 20 major arms sales from the United States. Just 3 items delay. One is the F-16, second is the Torpedo Mark 48. The 3 is the so-called JDAM. So I hope that all the Taiwanese people can understand that's our responsibility. We want to keep our lifestyle. Our potential online try to help us to boost up our defense capability. And besides the so-called Sun Tzu, the master of war, I will let us think about another gentleman, Mo Zi. This gentleman, he requests each country have the capability to defend itself actually. So you can think it's something like defense realism those days. So it requires every country should have the capability to defend itself. Finally, Taiwan in 2025 enjoy about more than $100 billion trade interest from the United States. We enjoy such a trade interest. I hope that we should pay more about our security, ourselves. Thank you.
我快速回应一下，我也公开讲过很多次，为什么国民党版的3800亿加 N 是不可行的。各位可能不太清楚这个军购的一个流程。我过去在立法院也担任过国防外交委员会的委员，然后这个也参与过台美军购的一个谈判。就是现在这种国民党版的3800亿加 N， 加 N 的概念是说，美国给你发价书，告诉你要卖你什么时候，你再编预算再买。可是各位都知道，军购这些是武器，这些是装备，这些是弹药。今天不是像说你在订 Uber Eats 的外送一样，今天订明天就有，也不是像订珍奶一样，今天订明天马上就会送得到。那我刚刚讲过，全世界烽火连天，你台湾都排这个生产的流程你都排不上的时候，你如果用这种态度，你跟美国说，那我们有决心保卫自己，但是你的军购拿出来的一个数字是这种样子的，我觉得老美完全不会相信你们。就像刚刚这个黄介正老师说的，今天这些美国人在这边，他们是真心的，真的很诚恳的跟台湾讲这些重话的原因是情况真的很危急。那第二就是说，3800加 N 3800亿是川普已经才是第一批售给台湾的这个军售的这个项目。那加 N 是说，这个我等到你要决定卖我什么时候，我再跟你买。但这个最大的问题是，如果今天老美什么都不卖给我们呢？那我们的阿兵哥不就在金门马祖在前线喝西北风，或者是说这样子一个军购的一个做法？就好像你在打棒球一样，每一球你都在短打，你没有一个全局的战略，你不知道短打完之后你下一个战术是什么。那对这个我们的官兵来说，你不可能到最后变成是有装备，这个有枪没有弹，或者是有装备没有内容。所以我这边也要奉劝我以前的这些立法院的老同事们，我可以完全理解说，作为一个反对党要强力的监督，但是现在的国民党有很多立法的工具可以去监督，不需要用杯葛的方式。有什么立法工具呢？比如说现在蓝白是立法院联合起来的多数，可以透过预算的这个冻结，或者是预算的这个达到什么样的一个军售案的指标，你再放行的一个做法，去进行一个监督的一个手段的工具。而不是提出一个我觉得两边没有办法去比较的一个版本。那其实对习近平来说，他最高兴了。 你的台湾内部越乱，它最能够越分化你。而且当川普在习近平面前的时候，他只要说，你看台湾自己都不要军购啊，台湾自己都不想要买武器，那你们美国为什么要卖它？那你们买我们的黄豆吧，你们就是买我们的战斗机，买我们的这个波音飞机吧。在这个过程底下，我觉得台湾完全就是在那一个川习会的这个菜单上面，所以我是很沉重的提出这样的一个呼吁说，如果今天面对的是这样一个险峻的状况的时候，我作为一个负责任的反对党，绝对可以用强力监督的方式去监督执政党有没有在军购案这件事情做到位，而且是不是你跟美方签约的这个采购的项目有没有如期交付？你可以用这样的方式去监督，而不是提出一个我觉得在美国的盟友的眼里面都看不下去的这样的一个版本。那另外就是说，如果真的过了这个3800，我觉得国民党要面对华府的质疑是非常大的。而且我相信郑丽文主席他到华府去的时候，他会面对国会跟行政单位非常大的质疑，他甚至于要去说明什么是叫做加恩。那我最后再提出说，国民党过去也有处理过重大的军购案，尤其这个军购是在1979年台美这个台湾关系法成立这个立法之后，所长年以来进行的一个项目。那完全提出这个加恩史无前例，过去也没有一个版本，也没有过去这样的一个立法的惯例，在执行面上，在操作面上都不可行的时候，我觉得是完全不负责任的一个做法。所以我觉得现在就是在川习会之前，我真的拜托各位立法院的老同事，还有立法院这些，我已经不知道在说什么了，就是很认真的看待我们现在台湾目前的国防需求，还有我们现在面对的国际的处境。今天没有因为政习会后中共就停止军演啊，没有因为政习会后这个共机绕台就停止了啊。如果是可以这样子的话，那我完全举双手赞成。可是并没有，我们面对的处境是越来越艰难，而且北京只会软得更软，硬得更硬。那难道我们就这样要放手了吗？我相信各位要好好的思考这样子。我们如果没有台湾，没有这块土地，我们什么都没有。
All right, Alexander, you want to respond on behalf of KMT? You're done? Okay, too much pressure. Okay, anyway, we still have like about 2 minutes to go. Will each of you kind of share with us about your perspective on this dialogue between the KMT, Zheng Liwen, the chairman, and also Xi Jinping? Do you think that's a good progress, in terms of the harmony between, the cross-strait relations, or you think that has nothing to do with the Trump administration and whatsoever?
You're asking about the chairwoman's recent visit. Okay. Elected leaders in Washington, D.C. do not trust Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping breaks every single promise that he has made to an American president in the past, pick your number, pick your time frame. Every promise that Xi Jinping has made to the United States of America, he has broken. He promised he wouldn't militarize the South China Sea in 2016. He promised that he would stop in 2015, he promised that he would stop the IP theft of American companies from Chinese companies. That has resumed again. We do not view good faith diplomacy as something the Chinese Communist Party practices. So the reason that we have not only doubt but concern about the trip is because we question how the chairwoman views Xi Jinping. Does she view him as a trustworthy interlocutor? If she does, that is a huge problem. That is an enormous problem.
It's not for us to involve ourselves in domestic politics of Taiwan. So whether she goes or not is her own choice. My only thought is that I think if President Lai flew to Beijing to meet Xi, he would be arrested and falsely charged and convicted and terrible. As a democracy, I question why the leader of another party would visit a country who would not let the country's president safely visit. But that's a choice. These are democratic choices, and she made a choice, and I respect her right to do that. I probably would not have done that myself.
All right, we've had a excellent, intense dialogue in this panel, and please join me to applaud our panelists and their very insightful contribution in this session. Thank you.
好，那欢迎再次回到我们的这个活动现场。刚刚上半场的精彩的讨论呢，相信大家都非常的过瘾哦。那下半场我们的主题是能源风险以及国安。其实过去能源政策常常被当作民生议题，可是在现在这个地缘政治的格局之下，能源政策已经是国安等级的核心议题，不管是中东局势的升温，或者是荷姆兹海峡的这个战略风险，以及台湾自己本身内部能源转型的结构哦，这个都是处处牵动着台湾的经济韧性以及战略安全。那所以呢，这一场我们也再次邀请到台湾以及美国的专家学者一起来讨论这个高度复杂的议题。首先，我们还是一样要来介绍今天下半场的主持人以及与谈来宾。今天下半场的主持人是前行政院政务委员邓正中。邓政委长期负责台湾的贸易谈判以及经济政策，在台美贸易等等关键议题上面都扮演非常重要的角色，是台湾最资深的经贸战略专家之一。Moderating our second session is Mr. Deng Zhenzhong, former minister without portfolio of the Executive Yuan of Taiwan. Minister Deng has played an important role in Taiwan's trade negotiation and economic strategy. Please welcome Minister Deng. 接下来为大家介绍下半场第一位与谈人，他是美国胡佛研究所政策研究员 David Fedor。David 长期研究能源政策、国际政治经济以及台湾的产业韧性，对全球能源格局的转变有深入的观察还有分析。Our first panelist is Mr. David Fedor, Policy Fellow at the Hoover Institution.David's research focuses on energy policy, international political economy, and Taiwan's industrial resilience. Welcome. 第二位是美国哈德逊研究所资深研究员 Riley Waters。Riley 专注于印太地区的科技、贸易以及供应链的安全议题。尤其对台湾半导体的产业以及能源供需的关联有丰富的研究。Next, please welcome Mr. Riley Waters, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute. Riley specializes in technology, trade, and supply chain security in the Indo-Pacific. We are glad to have him here. Welcome. 第三位是胡佛研究所研究员 Caris Templeman， 他经常针对台海关系以及台湾的政治议题进行公开的发言。The third panelist is Caris Templeman. He is a research fellow at the Hoover Institute. He writes and speaks about cross-strait relations frequently. Welcome. 第四位是中央大学经济系教授吴大任教授。吴教授长期研究台湾的总体经济产业发展政策，他对经贸关系呢，非常的了解，是台湾学界在这个领域最具代表性的声音之一。Our fourth panelist is Professor Wu Da-ren. Professor Wu is a leading authority on Taiwan's macroeconomics and energy economics.A warm welcome to Professor Wu. 最后是我们的好朋友，来自上半场的东海大学政治系教授邱诗怡教授。邱教授这一次将延伸讨论能源议题背后的地缘政治意涵。再次欢迎邱诗怡教授。Rounding out our panel is Professor Albert Chu, who moderated our first session and now joins as a panelist.Welcome back, Professor Chu. 所有的来宾现在已经就位，让我们把下半场的舞台交给主持人邓正中政委，请政委带领大家展开讨论，谢谢。
谢谢。Thank you very much. After Professor Chu moderate a very impressive, remarkable panel discussion, we have to work very hard to make our discussion be attractive to the audience. It is my honor to moderate this session. Might not be that excited as they did before earlier, but still very, very important issues that we have to talk. I want to thank the organizers and all of you to join us this afternoon. I think I want to begin with one key point. Is energy no longer just an economic issue? It is a core national security issue, especially for Taiwan. Today's discussion will focus on 4 key issues. And let me put them in a very simple terms. First, if something disrupts energy imports, such as shipping routes being blocked, how long can Taiwan continue to operate in a normal manner? Where would the pressure show up first? Second, when we design energy policy, what really comes first? Cost or security? Are we still mainly trying to keep price low, or should we start treating energy as something essential to our survival? Third, as Taiwan's semiconductor and AI industries keep growing, can our power supply keep up? More importantly, can it remain stable under pressure or expected shock? Fourth, the most fundamentally, what kind of energy strategy does Taiwan truly need? Is it about generating more electricity, or do we need a system that can still function even in a crisis? These are not technical questions. They are strategic choices that Taiwan needs to make. We are very honored to have this very distinguished panel with us, and you are already being introduced. So I won't add anything more, and because of time strain, I would like to say your initial comments probably say 7 to 8 minutes, and then for the rest of the time we can exchange our views or with the audience. So, Debbie, please start.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I want to say 3 things about energy and about security. I actually want to start by talking about rubber. Has anyone ever heard of the rubber famine? Anyone? Rubber famine? In February 1942, Japan overran Singapore, and the United States lost access to 97% of its natural rubber supply, then the only supply of rubber that we had. We knew this was a risk. We knew it was a distinct possibility. And actually, individuals in the US government had studied in some detail what they should do to mitigate the risks of this disruption. They had 3 main approaches that they identified over a decade before the supply was actually cut. The first of those was, of course, to stockpile rubber. And we did that. We had a rubber stockpile. Unfortunately, it's expensive to stockpile rubber. It doesn't last forever. It can last for about 3 or 4 years. So there's always a cost about how much rubber to stockpile in the US. And by 1942, we had about 600,000 tons of rubber stockpiled in warehouses across the United States at a time when our consumption was about 800,000 tons per year. So a little bit less than a year of rubber supply. Now, that was less than half of what it was actually in the mid-1930s. So our stockpile had actually shrunk over time. It was hard to justify the cost. And by 1939, when Europe was at war, it was too late for us to start surging our imports of natural rubber. The second option that we identified long before the actual fall of Singapore, was alternatives. Of course, most of our rubber came from rubber trees that were grown in plantations in tropical climates. The US does not have tropical climates. But we did know about a plant called guaiin, which could be planted in Mexico and Central America, and potentially planted in places like Salinas in the Central Valley of California, not too far from where I live. So we evaluated this. There were some commercial efforts. A number of them failed because they could not compete with the cheap cost of imports from abroad. Actually, a name you might recognize. The US Army sent 2 people to Salinas, California in 1930 to investigate the economic properties and potential for building a guaiin industry in the US. One of those people was Major Dwight Eisenhower. He wrote a report on what he found out in Salinas. And he said, we could do it, but he also assessed that if Southeast Asia's maritime supply routes of rubber were to be cut off from the United States, then we would rapidly deplete our reserves and be in a very critical situation for wartime needs. By 1939, it was too late to add to stockpiles, and certainly by 1942, it was too late to start growing guaiin. It takes 4 years for those plants to mature. Third option, and people know about this one, was a synthetic rubber program. We had been working on the technology, and there were some debates over whether to use ethylene, or to use an ethanol base sort of from crude oil, which Standard Oil preferred, or to use a crude oil base. It worked out. It worked out, but it came very close. In the US, we think about this as a triumph that we were able to get through the war with that extra supply, but we came very close. In December 1944, our stockpiles of natural rubber were almost exhausted. And only because we could bring in rubber from Sri Lanka, from the British routes, were we able to extend the war into 1945. By 1946, we would have been completely out of rubber. We could not have made airplane tires. So it was close. It was a squeaker. And what this story tells us is really a key problem that we all face today, and Minister Dung, you mentioned this. What is the insurance premium they're willing to pay in times of peace for the risk that we have when we're reliant on imports? There's not an easy answer to that. Everyone has to decide what the risk insurance premium should be. Often we underprice. Let me say something about energy security. Whenever we make energy policy choices, we have to balance the economic impacts of our choices, the environmental impacts of our choices, and the security impacts of our energy policy choices. I worked for our former Secretary of State, George Shultz, for about 10 years at Hoover before he passed away. George Shultz used to always say, if you ignore any one of those 3 legs of the stool, eventually you'll get mugged by reality. Now the problem is all 3 of those are important, but all 3 of those have different time frames associated with them. Energy security. If you don't have the energy there, if you don't have the molecules, that kills you fast. It's a short-term problem when it breaks. Cost matters a lot, but you can suffer a little bit longer for higher cost. It's more of a medium-term issue before it breaks. And then the environmental concerns are probably the longest term. Still important, but often not as urgent when they go wrong. So you have a little bit more flexibility as you balance. Now, conversely, if that's the pace at which these things break, I like to think about the pace at which democracies actually address these issues or try to address those issues in their policy process. And at least from a US perspective, and I think it's true in Taiwan, in recent years, we've tended to do the reverse. In some ways, we start with the environmental goals. They're easy to measure. Things like net zero, we can measure emissions, we can see progress. And when you can measure something, it's easy to engineer for it and to try to improve that metric. And we've done that in the US. We're recalibrating our views on that now. In Taiwan, I know you have a net zero plan as well. Cost, you can measure, of course, with price. It's important. But you can also go down a long way and make choices that end up hurting your price of energy over time. And by the time you realize it, it might be too late. Now, energy security is very hard to measure. We can talk about reserve margins for our electric grid. We can talk about storage. We can talk about security through diversity of sources. But no one can give me a number that says, now you're secure, or now you're more secure, or now you're less secure. And so it's hard to invest in something. It's hard to incur costs for something that I can't measure and I can't show to my constituents. So politically, it gets undervalued again and again and again. Now, I think today, with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, we're facing one of the canonical worst-case energy security scenarios certainly for East Asia and a place like Taiwan. And I think it's even hard to measure today just how much of a hole Taiwan and some of its partners are in. I'll just say Taiwan is not alone as an energy import functional island in East Asia, just like Japan, just like South Korea, the Philippines. Taiwan today, I think about natural gas in particular and the importation of LNG. I hope that the risks we're seeing today, the disruptions we're seeing today, can be a watershed moment for Taiwan thinking about improving the security of its LNG supply, much in the same way the oil crises of the 1970s made much of the developed world and importers around the world think about the security of oil. That's going to be a cooperative conversation. Probably the most important people in that conversation are Taiwan, Japan, the United States, Australia, Korea, maybe India. This is a golden opportunity for Taiwan to take the lead and to think about what the plan is for the next LNG import crisis. You'll have to deal with today, but you can also start planning for the next with the political momentum that you have here today. And that's going to include things like, should Taiwan have its own LNG carriers? Japan has 200 LNG carriers across Japanese associated shippers. Taiwan has 0. Other efforts like joint stocks, drawdown mechanisms, et cetera, we can go more in detail on that in the QA. I'm going to say one more thing, and that's about US-Taiwan energy. I'm in Silicon Valley at the Hoover Institution. When I go up the Hoover Tower, 15 stories up the elevator, and I look out from the observation deck, I can see all of Silicon Valley. I start looking down to the south. Cupertino, Apple, Santa Clara, NVIDIA. I look over at Mountain View at Google, Menlo Park, Meta, Redwood City, Oracle, and then up to San Francisco, OpenAI, Anthropic, and 1,000 other startups. The United States and Taiwan are tied like this with the rise of AI. We're closer than we've ever been before. Tens of trillions of dollars of market capital out that observation deck is because of the production, in much part because of the production on this island. And Americans are starting to realize that. I think that's a good thing. We're lucky. We are lucky that our greatest partner in Taiwan has that capability and that we're working together to do that. But it also means that we start to think very carefully about the security of the energy system that underpins that production capability. Let me put it another way. In 2016, 10 years ago, when Tsai Ing-wen was taking office, the top 10 largest companies in the world by market cap, 4 of them were PRC banks. 1 of them was a Hong Kong bank. The other 5 were US financial institutions. The top 10 market cap companies in the world today, in 2026, 8 of them are US technology companies that either directly or indirectly rely on the production of the 9th. And I think you know what the 9th is. The 10th is Saudi Aramco. It might not be the 10th anymore. So we are like this because of the rise of AI. And I study our semiconductor supply chain too. I think it's so positive that there's diversification of some of these capabilities into the United States. It's important for our own innovation capabilities. I think it's important for Taiwanese firms to be building in the US. But in any politically relevant time frame, in any economically relevant time frame, we are reliant on Taiwan. We're more reliant than ever with the surge of AI imports than we were even before we started the CHIPS Act. And what that means Taiwan is strong. We had a conversation in the last panel about big neighbors, big powerful neighbors. Think about those companies on that top 10 list today versus 10 years ago. We're in a different world. When I sit in America, I think about who is strong, and I see one party that's very strong, and that's where we are. But it also means that Taiwan's energy security, Taiwan's security, is actually US security. We're not going to diversify away. The best way that we protect the market cap of all those firms and our innovative potential and our AI dominance revolution runs through Taiwan is to make sure that Taiwan is safe and secure. And that includes energy. Taiwan's energy security is the US national security and US economic prosperity at this point as well. And so it's a golden opportunity for more US-Taiwan collaboration on a number of issues to make sure it's in Taiwan's national interest and it's in US national interest as well. We care about values, but the interests are so real right now. Nuclear is a wonderful example on this. We've talked about some of the cross investments and the great technologies that are coming out of the United States on this. I know there's conversations about, for example, restarting nuclear. We're doing that in the US too. We're about to restart our first nuclear power plant for the first time ever. It took us about 3 years to go through the licensing refurbishment process. I think Taiwan should see that as a cap at the high end. You should be able to do it faster than us. Certainly you can build fabs in half the time that we can do it. So I think you can do it within 3 years. We talk about SMRs as a very promising new technology, and I think that's a great thing for Taiwan to be looking at as well. We're starting to build those in the US, both Gen 3 and Gen 4 plus SMRs. But don't wait for us to do it first. Learn alongside us. It will take us 10 years to deploy those. Don't wait 10 years and then do it yourself. Learn alongside us in the process, and don't treat it as a substitute for the plans that you have. We can go into more details on other areas for collaboration, but that's a strong one. I'll just come back to the point that Taiwan, sometimes and I think from Taiwan, we talk about the idea of the US being a protector of Taiwan from a military point of view. That was a lot of discussion in the last panel. Or maybe that Taiwan has a silicon shield, that its strengths in semiconductors economics sort of give the world a reason to care about Taiwan, give the US a reason to care and protect Taiwan. I want to go beyond that. And my argument is that because the capabilities here on the island, the centrality of AI to the new US economy, if I'm the President of the United States and I think about where all my economic growth is coming from these companies, that is enabled by the expertise and capability on this island. So it's Taiwan actually as a protectorate of the world, and certainly as a protectorate of the United States, but it rests on Taiwan's energy security and affordability and sustainability, and I think that's something the US would love to work more with Taiwan on going forward in a very motivated and urgent way.
Thank you very much, David. This is, I think you raised several very, very important points. Well, allow me to use 1 minute to very quickly go over what you mentioned in Chinese. 我觉得他这个 David 他几个 point 哈，两位教授可以更正我，假如说我的这个听来的不对的话哈，两位更正我。就是说，第一个哈，我讲最后2点啊。第一个，全世界的大公司前8名都是美国的高科技公司，那第9名是我们的台积电。没有第9名，前面8名通通不能活了啊！所以台湾的能源安全就是美国的国家安全。这个2个国家已经这么密切的在一起了，关联在一起了哈，所以这是他的一个 point。我是非常佩服他的这个深入观察，但我们听起来蛮舒服，也蛮沉重的啦哈。那么，但另外一个就是说，假如说这个是这么重要的事情，现在美国也开始在发展能源，很多国家都开始在发展了。那我们核能了哈，那我们也是应该跟着慢慢走，而不是等到别人都做完了，我们再去开始再去学再去想，那可能就太晚了啦哈。Thank you very much, David. So next one, Riley, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, former minister. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the trade and investment space right now, but it's very tangent to what David was talking about. It's very similar to what all these panels, both panels are kind of hinting around, is this strong relationship that we have between our two economies. The economy it underpins everything, right? You don't have defense spending without a successful economy. You don't have oil and LNG and other byproducts and semiconductors traveling without a vibrant trading system and ports and ships and et cetera, et cetera. The AI boom right now is it's what's driving growth in both of our economies. Without it right now, both economies would either be stagnant or not growing at all. So there's some benefits with this boom. There's also some downside For example, from a U.S. perspective, the trade deficit with Taiwan this last year doubled. $70 billion in difference from the year before. I mean, we were just talking about spending $40 billion on Taiwan's defense. Well, we just bought $70 billion more of goods from Taiwan last year than the year before that. Actually, it's quite more than that if you do the math. So it goes to show what Dave was talking about, this intertwining of our economies much more than ever before. We talk about the Silicon Shield. I would say we need a new term because we're integrating more now than we ever are before. And underpinning all of this is the new trade and investment agreements that have been announced between our two governments. Now, these are not implemented just yet. There's a lot of legal issues that need to be sorted out, particularly on the American side. We need to figure out which trade authorities we're actually using. Then, of course, the LY will have to consider this legislation. But I think for all intents and purposes, the trade deal it's an issue, but the investment agreement that is a part of that is significant. I mean, we're talking about doubling down on this AI boom. We're talking about doubling down on the integration and reliance between our two economies. We're asking Taiwanese companies to invest more into America, but that doesn't mean we're going to buy less from Taiwan at all. It's not like we're going to just rely on what's produced domestically at all. It's going to be quite the opposite. I suspect that this trade deficit that we have with Taiwan to persist for quite a while, which comes with political cost. And if you talk to some folks in America, they will quickly tie that deficit to the conversation that was happening in the last panel, which is the defense spending. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but it is what many politicians believe, and it's a theme that you see, particularly when they talk with our European partners. Thankfully, the U.S.-Taiwan relationship, I think, is stronger than many U.S.-European partnerships right now. So on the trade side, it's good. On the investment side, I think a particularly interesting point of the investment agreement that we've announced, which ties to this overarching theme of energy today, is as a part of the trade agreement and investment agreement, Taiwan has committed to invest in America's LNG export capabilities. It's committing to increase its own LNG storage capability for the sole purpose of importing more U.S. LNG. So we're willing to commit more to the Taiwan companies and talent and resources coming through the semiconductor industry, while the Taiwan government is looking to invest more in the American energy capability, export capability. Again, we're intertwining much more deeper. Those agreements, wonderful. They're not going to, of course, solve the current issue, but perhaps they get to David's point, is how do we prepare for the next crisis? And it's the same thing with the semiconductors industry and why American officials want more domestic production of high-end chips. Again, we're not going to stop buying chips from Taiwan, but in that next crisis, there is American politicians, American officials feel that there is a necessity to have at least some portion of that within the United States. And so it's important for our, I think, economic security going forward. It does help, I think, the political environment between our two economies. Tariffs, I understand, are frustrating. And every economy is dealing with American trade policy right now. I would say Taiwan is succeeding in this aspect. There are many economies that are not succeeding, and it's driving the political relationship between the United States and those economies apart, which has a negative effect down the stream. You go politics, and then it's business. and investors don't want to move capital, they don't want to invest, it hurts the long-term relationship. For Taiwan, though, I think it's quite successful. And I'm really looking forward to the implementation of this agreement, which we've talked a lot about in the past about a U.S.-Taiwan free trade agreement, a U.S.-Taiwan bilateral trade agreement. I see this as, and Biden, the last American administration under President Biden, they started this process. They started implementing the 21st century U.S.-Taiwan trade initiative, which I took as a step toward a BTA. But it was slow, very slow. And it was toward the end of his administration, it's questionable how much further it was really going to go. This goes far beyond that, in that this is probably the most comprehensive trade agreement that the U.S. and Taiwan may ever have, and that signifies something special. Anyways, I'll leave it there. I look forward to comments and questions later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Riley. Very good points. 还是一样哈，我就2句话就好了。那个 Riley 就提到台湾跟美国签的这个协定嘛哈，觉得说这个协定其实是对2个国家的关系是更密切了哈。大概台湾跟美国从来也没有签过这么重大、这么全面的协定，将来可能也没有机会。那这个让协定可以给这个未来的台湾美国关系奠定更好的基础。那刚才他跟 David 提到，那个 Riley 也提到的，就我刚刚忘记跟大家报告的，就是说我们现在趁这个机会真的要想一下下一个阶段，再碰到能源危机的时候，我们应该要怎么办？这个是一个好的机会要去想。So next one is Paris. So please. You want to use mine?
Hello? We're live. Okay. So I'm conscious of the time. I'm going to try to keep my remarks fairly short here. I'm also not an energy expert or an economist, unlike my fellow panelists here. So I wanted to offer a bit of a historical perspective on the U.S.-Taiwan economic relationship. When I was first hired at Stanford, my first task was to organize a conference on the Trans-Pacific Partnership and Taiwan. This was in 2013. At the time, the Ma Ying-jeou administration in Taiwan was very concerned that the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was a regional trading agreement between, I think, 12 countries in the end, that included the United States and Japan, but did not include the People's Republic of China, that agreement would be signed and Taiwan would be left out in the cold, and it would be isolated economically from the rest of the region and potentially the world. And so our task in that conference was to think through how Taiwan might be able to join the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And at the end of 2 days, we came to what I thought was a pretty clear conclusion that was quite depressing, which is Taiwan could only get into the TPP if Beijing, the People's Republic of China, also came into the TPP at the same time. And that Beijing wielded enough influence in the region to block Taiwan's access to the TPP. And that meant that Taiwan was incredibly reliant on Beijing's permission, effectively, to engage in regional trade. It also meant that, it also emphasized for me that the kind of global trading framework during that period in which Taiwan had already been integrated, in particular the World Trade Organization, which Taiwan entered in 2001, that was paralyzed. It wasn't functioning well, and the adoption of alternative regional trading arrangements were probably going to put Taiwan at a further disadvantage than it already was. And in addition, the United States wasn't that interested in carrying a lot of weight for Taiwan to get Taiwan into the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so there was a very narrow possibility that in US negotiations with China over trade, that Taiwan might be able to kind of squeeze in on the side. And that was the only way that this could work. So the Ma administration, I think logically, given this conclusion, decided that Taiwan's economic future had to lie with greater integration with the mainland Chinese economy, and that they had to have good relations with Beijing in order to expand Taiwan's trading relations with the rest of the world. So in other words, you go to the world through China, right? That sounds today like we're in a radically different place today, I should note. It's remarkable how much better the situation is today strategically for Taiwan. Taiwan is a critical economic player in the world today in a way that it was not in 2013, or at least it wasn't appreciated as such. The US is now Taiwan's largest trading partner for the first time in 30 years. In 2013, it was the PRC. Taiwan is now the fourth largest trading partner of the United States. That's actually larger than the PRC in terms of trade volume. I had to triple check this. Riley can correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's a remarkable fact. Taiwan economically is more important to the United States now than the People's Republic of China. And Taiwan, of course, is absolutely critical, as we noted earlier, to the development of AI in the semiconductor industry. And that last fact is not going to change anytime soon. The Taiwan semiconductor industry has such a daunting advantage over competitors that it's not going to lose its lead, no matter how much investment there is in the United States or Japan or Europe and so forth. And then the last fact that I think this just happened last week, is that Taiwan's stock market, the size of Taiwan's stock market, just exceeded the size of the UK stock market. And so Taiwan is clearly punching above its weight in terms of its economic impact in the world today. And so I'll just note, the last panel had a lot of focus on the risks that Taiwan faces in a more uncertain geopolitical environment, and with a more uncertain US administration, a more uncertain China over the next few years. But I want to also emphasize that while there may be unprecedented risks right now, there are also unprecedented opportunities for Taiwan, opportunities that were almost unimaginable 12 years ago when we were talking about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And so in thinking about how the US-Taiwan economic relationship should develop, I think Riley's already touched on the importance of this trade and investment agreement, particularly the investment part. I'd note there's lots of concern in the United States now about supply chains that include components from mainland China. Taiwan is well positioned in a lot of industries to supply alternatives, the so-called non-red supply chain alternatives. And that relationship is set to grow deeper. There's also opportunities now to engage in greater joint training and education, particularly in high-tech development. It's remarkable to me that we sit in Silicon Valley and so many of the tech companies have Taiwanese or Taiwanese Americans leading them or directly involved in this technological innovation. I'm not an economist or an engineer by training, but I've had to get to know a lot of engineers from Taiwan simply because of how many of them there are within 10 miles of our campus. And so I hope this people-to-people exchange continues to deepen, because it is good for both of our countries. And then finally, I'll just reiterate something David noted, and Riley as well. There is a nice complementarity between the United States energy production and Taiwan's energy needs now. The United States is actually a major exporter now of liquid natural gas. And Taiwan, of course, relies heavily on imported liquid natural gas to meet its energy needs. And so there's a very kind of logical next step to deepening our economic interaction by supporting investment in the United States in extraction of LNG with the idea that it would be shipped to Taiwan. So I want to end on that, I think, more optimistic note. There are lots of opportunities over the next few years, not just risks, and I remain optimistic about Taiwan's future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karis. Thank you for your very encouraging comments. 他说他刚参加这个工作的时候，2013年，我们那时候觉得很悲惨，就是要参加这些区域的经济贸易协定啊，都没有机会。我们想说这下完蛋了呢哈。但是你看这样子10多年下来啊，台湾反而就是靠着自己啊，这样子变成这么好。所以我说我就谢谢他的这个鼓励啊，让对我们的这个鼓舞。那好，那我们是不是请那个吴教授
？OK， 请容许我用那个中文，好。其实哈，因为刚才我们这些美国的朋友，他们谈的主要是台湾跟美国之间贸易关系，还有一些互相投资的关系了哈。那反而是比较没有 touch 到重要的能源的议题。好，那不过我想从美国的角度来看，他们现在在能源的部分已经几乎完全没有问题，因为现在全球最大的能源生产的国家就是美国。好，那他们当然不是出口最多了哈。但是以生产量来讲，现在美国是全球第一嘛，好，所以对他们来讲是不缺能源啊。那我们现在缺天然气没有错哈。那天然气呢，以2025年我们的进口来看，好，卡达跟澳洲，好，他们的进口都超过30%，好，那美国只有10%。那为什么会这么低？美国也是很多天然气的生产，因为它现在的出口港口是在墨西哥湾。好，那墨西哥湾刚好就在我们的地球的对面啊，好，所以其实距离是非常的远，好，所以那个运输成本，那现在运输成本又更高了，哦，那不过我们当然是希望未来在阿拉斯加那边可以开始出口，那或许就可以解我们台湾的问题了，好，所以我想我今天可能就是要讲一些比较负面的部分了。好，因为能源问题确实就是是国安议题，好，是很重要的 social security， 就是国安的议题啦。好，那个这个部分呢，其实我们可以从几个数据大概就可以了解一下。好，我们台湾在去年就是进入完全没有核能，就是核3厂2号机。好，在去年退场之后，台湾就完全没有核能。好，所以呢，我们目前啊，我们的发电结构里面就是我们原来的目标是希望在2025年，好，我们的那个再生能源可以达到20%，好，然后煤炭的发电30%，天然气的发电50%。那确实呢，天然气的发电现在在今年1月、2月，我们已经超过50，好。大概是到52、53，好，那煤炭呢大概是37啦，所以两个部分加起来，好，其实是超过85%，因为我们的这个再生能源的部分呢，到现在好，我们就有13%，好，而且呢，其实再生能源是没有办法取代核能，好，因为核能呢，它最主要就是作为我们整个发电基础里面的所谓的基载，那基载它需要的是稳定的发电，成本要低。好，那所以说天然气它光是那个不稳定这样的性质就很难去取代我们的核能。好，所以取代核能，好，当然还是以火力发电为主。那我们现在台湾火力发电，好，它的占比是超过85%。那天然气的部分呢，是目前大家非常关注的问题啦，因为中东的这场战争，好，就是导致我们从卡达。进口的部分，好，在去年大概是33%左右。那这么大的占比，哈，那突然没有了，好，当然对我们就产生非常大的压力啦。好，所以这个部分呢，我觉得它牵涉到我们台湾整个能源安全它的韧性。好，那我们可以看到，那个台湾其实我们准备要用天然气来做主要的这个发电方式，这件事情我们其实还没有完全准备好。 好，就是天然气我们台湾并没有生产，我们台湾95%以上的能源是要依赖进口。好，刚才也有提到，那在这里呢，我们可以看到，好，就是光是天然气的部分哈，那个就是我们的进口，现在所有的进口85%是用来发电。好，所以我们进口天然气最主要是用来发电。好，那我们现在呢，在接收跟储存的部分，好，可能都还没有完全准备好，因为我们现在主要是有2个接收站，好，就是永安跟台中。好，那个大潭那边哈，现在已经可能是开始在试营运了哈，但是现在即便有的话，量也是非常的少。所以呢，我们因为接收跟储存好都不是很够，所以我们现在在3月份、4月份，我们的安全存量只有11天。好，那刚刚好符合我们法定的这个规定了。好，那我们其实可以跟其他国家比较一下。我们邻近的国家，日本、韩国，其实他们也都进口天然气。那日本呢，它的安全存量大概都是维持在20天左右。好，那韩国好，它是维持在30天到50天之间。那上个月他还宣布哈，他们有就是因为那个他们也碰到卡达的问题，好，所以呢，他们事实上就是一直在增加他们的储存，所以他们在上个月的宣布是它可以到52天。好，但是我们台湾就有11天，到了夏天的时候呢，我们只剩下7到8天。好，因为我们所以对台湾来讲哈，就是因为我们在那个天然气的接收跟储存哦，还是有一些问题。好，那如果在夏天的时候，因为安全存量就有7到8天，万一出了什么意外，好，也不要说中国来封锁了，好，就是那个台风造成港口受到破坏，其实这个可能性是存在的。好，那我们现在2个接收站，那如果真的有一些问题的话，那可能就会影响到我们台湾整体的供电。好，那所以这个其实我们也从这次的中东战争，好，可以看出我们台湾我们能源的一些这个韧性的问题啦。好，那我觉得这个对我们台湾未来的经济发展真的是至关重要哈。那个是真的是我们在未来可能5到10年哈都一定要去解决的问题。那另外呢，就是我们在用电在负载的部分，就是有关用电的需求哈，其实哈那个我们大部分的电的生产哈都是用在工业的部分，好，就是工业用电其实是占掉我们台湾50%以上的用电。好，所以我们民生用电其实是相对比较少，好，大概就30%左右。好，那在工业用电里面呢，刚才我想美国的朋友他们也一再提到我们的这些科技产业，好，当然是有很好的表现。但是呢，光是台积电一家公司，它的用电量，好，在我们全体用电的占比超过10%，未来可能要提升到15%。好，因为半导体的生产其实用电量非常的高。那我们在台湾呢，其实是有能源短缺的问题啦。好，那所以说，那个未来台积电到美国去投资，至少是可以部分的解决有关那个能源需求的问题。好，那所以说，我想我就提供这些数据，好，让各位了解我们台湾目前，好，就是我们整个能源的一些现况。好，那我们也从过去的一些战争，包括乌俄战争，我们也可以看到，好，就是他们在作战的时候，其实如果有核电厂，其实他们都会避免攻击，因为它会产生非常大的影响。好，那所以说，即便我们从核安的角度来考虑啦，那未来是不是真的要恢复核电？我是觉得，我个人是觉得这个方向，至少我们要好好去研究一下了，哈，也不要完全去排除它的可能性。那台湾呢，是现在全球仅存的2个，好，就是没有核电的国家嘛，好，就是德国跟台湾。那德国呢，它其实跟台湾情况很不一样。台湾呢，我们是独立电网，好，所以我们有缺电，我们几乎没有办法得到外援。但是德国它常常跟法国买电啊，那法国很多核电厂，好，所以其实情况是很难去比较。那我们也可以看到哈，现在日本它的能源政策发展的方向也是逐渐要去恢复核电了，因为它也感受到它整体的这个能源结构，那个对它未来的经济发展也是会产生很大的影响。好，所以韩国日本。它在那个有关能源政策的规划， 看起来他们好，似乎是，最起码他们在韧性上是比台湾还高一些啦。好，那他们有些做法，其实我们都有类似的问题。那，其实是可以好好去参考他们的一些做法。那我的报告先到这里，谢谢。
谢谢那个吴教授哈。那是不是请那个邱教授？
All right, thank you, Professor Wu. I think it's time coming back to the English speech part. Okay, personally, I should be the last to comment on this topic. The energy should be very, professional and also very narrow focus. But as a political science professor, I would like to kind of contribute a little bit about my observation of the development of AI in Taiwan and how that relates to the requirements of this enormous amounts of electricity in Taiwan. Okay, so now I'm trying to convince the audience in the room that Taiwan realistically still needs nuclear power in the AI era. Okay, I will tell you why. Okay, first of all, the development of AI will require enormous amount of electricity, like what I just said, because AI and the semiconductor are pushing Taiwan towards a heavy reliance on baseload power, and nuclear energy is one of the possible solutions to that. Even though I know the ruling party, DPP, so far, kind of switch its direction towards the recovery of the nuclear power that actually received a lot of criticism from its own supporter. But I think it's an inevitable destination in the future because of the political risk and also the changing vibe, dynamic, what have you, between Taiwan and China. Okay, as we all know that AI data centers and semiconductor fabs, as Professor Wu just mentioned, require three things. Number one, 24/7 operation. Number two, extremely stable voltage. Number three, zero tolerance for intermittent supply. So, it's unbearable for this on and off electricity supply. That's gonna be very hurtful to the AI industry. However, Taiwan's current energy structure is, number one, renewables. Solar, wind are intermittent. Number two, LNG, natural gas, is highly dependent on imports and maritime transport, as Professor Wu just mentioned. So this makes stable, low carbon, weather independent power increasingly scarce. Nuclear energy naturally returns to the center of the debates. Second, President Lai Ching-te signaling the potential restart of the nuclear power plants, number two and number three, reflects energy reality overriding ideology. The DPP, Democratic Progressive Party, has long promoted a nuclear-free homeland, but now faces three simultaneous pressures. Number one is the explosive growth in AI and semiconductor electricity demand. Number two is natural gas security risks. We learned this lesson from the Strait of Hormuz, maritime vulnerabilities over there. And number three is the net zero carbon commitments. Together, these pressures leads to one conclusion, is that without nuclear power, it's nearly impossible for Taiwan to achieve stable supply, decarbonization, and national security at the same time. And therefore, the discussion of the restarting nuclear plants is not simply a policy reversal, but a forced recalculation of energy structure by reality. Okay. Third, there's no longer about being pro anti-nuclear, but about risk prioritized issue. In the past, Taiwan's risk hierarchy was nuclear safety risk, but now we have transitioned that, from that to power shortage risk. So it is shifted towards geopolitical risk, like what I just said, blockade, from PLA, and supply disruption. That's very severe. And as many of you may remember, under Taiwan's administration, I'm not sure about Zheng Wei, who was still in the office. We actually had that power outage from time to time in summertime. That was really suffer to me. Okay, so I think we should consider this seriously, even though the ruling party, they do shoulder the burden of, still continue the no nuclear power policy, but it's a daunting task out there to deal with. And power shortage risk, industrial relocation, decarbonization pressure. So the real question becomes, among all the risks, is nuclear power actually the more manageable one? Taiwan still needs it. First, nuclear power is currently the only energy source that simultaneously meets 3 key requirements: stability, low carbon, and relatively secure supply. Okay, so that's kind of my first point. And the second point is that, in recent times, the SMRs, the small modular reactors, become a new solution, even though it's still in a RD phase, but we should be optimistic about its future. First, SMRs address the core problems of traditional nuclear power: too large, too expensive, and too slow to build. Traditional nuclear challenges are 3 long construction periods, more than 10 years to build. Second is massive capital investments. And number 3 is high political and social resistance. But on the other hand, SMR has its advantage. Number 1, factor build, low cost and shorter timelines. And module design is scalable expansion. It's also, has a smaller size, reduce single point risk. So I think we can think about the debates about this nuclear power or not in the past was sometimes between scientific and ideological. But as the technology advances, I think a lot of problems could be solved in the future. But I'm not sure about those anti-nuclear kind of advocates or opponents in the past in Taiwan. They still are willing to accept this fact, because now the dynamic is very different. And I think given the fact that Taiwan needs to survive under the potential attack of PLA, I think we should consider the stable supply of electricity based on this nuclear power plant. That's my take here.
Thank you very much, Professor Chiu. A very good point. Now, we still have 15 minutes until 5 o'clock. So, are there any questions that among panelists that you want add on anything? David already raised his hands, so please.
I'll volunteer, thank you. Just to follow up on the nuclear conversation, and thank you for both Professor for adding the context of the energy figures in Taiwan and touching on the nuclear restarts. I'll just say Taiwan is not alone in reconsidering its stance on nuclear power in the world. As was mentioned, Germany also closed its nuclear power plants. Germany is very slowly and very painfully going through a reconsideration of its energy strategy and trying to have a more pragmatic perspective. Now, it had to learn that through a very tough period. And we've heard some amazing statements from the German leadership in the past few months, including the Chancellor saying that the decision for Germany to shut down nuclear when it was so reliant on imports was the worst strategic decision that Germany had ever made. That's high stakes to say something like that. So, the United States, too, has been reconsidering how it thinks about nuclear power. For example, there's been a sea change in public support for nuclear power in the United States today. People in the U.S. we have 100 nuclear power plants in the U.S. We've had them for decades. We built them in the 1970s and 80s, just like Taiwan did. And I think public support was sort of 50-50 in the U.S. You had people who liked it, you had people who didn't like it. That's changed dramatically in the last few years, particularly among youth. It's the young people who've become the most pro-nuclear power in the United States today because they see it as one of the cleanest energy sources. People say people have been telling them to care about climate, and they say, well, why aren't we doing this? This looks like a really good solution. And of course, we have a lot of optimism now because of the growth from AI and new data centers. As the market is expanding, as we too are growing our electric grid, people are thinking about nuclear power, and that's become a really good market pull for new technologies, or even restarting existing plants. So the restart conversation, in the United States, we had never restarted a nuclear power plant before. We had 3 ways to think about nuclear power plants. You were either building it, and there's a license to build it, you had a license to run it and operate it, or you had a license to decommission it. We never thought there was a 4th, and we discovered there is a 4th, and the 4th is restart. We closed about 10 nuclear power plants over the past 10 years in the United States, mostly for economic reasons. Now, with the return to electricity demand growth from AI, we're restarting them. Palisades in Michigan is the first. I mentioned it took us about 3 years to go through the process of figuring out what the rules and inspection process should be for that. We'd never done it before. And now we've done it. That plant will load fuel in the next few months. And I'm sure that Taiwan can do it more quickly. I'm sure that our next plant, 3 Mile Island, for example, in Pennsylvania, will restart the Duane Arnold plant in Iowa as well. Those should be faster than 3 years because we already have a process. And I think that Taiwan and the US can learn together on that process because we've just done it. Similarly for new builds, it's a possibility. Actually, in the US, we have had plants that we built to 80 or 90% completion, and then we decided we didn't want it, and we came back 20 years later and we finished it. We've done that. So it's possible. Taiwan is not alone in thinking about these challenges. And it's also, and back to the panel, I think the theme of this panel, it's a great opportunity for further US-Taiwan collaboration on this issue that's of critical importance to both of our national interests.
Thank you very much, Debbie. Can I ask you a question? This is, sorry that I take advantage as a moderator. How is the waste issue in the United States?
Thank you. I meant to mention that as well. In Taiwan, as in everywhere around the world, people are concerned about waste. We call it spent fuel in the US. There's really 2 kinds of nuclear waste. One is the high-level waste. It's spent fuel. You enrich uranium to about 5%, and then after you use it for 18 months, it doesn't produce enough heat anymore. It's down to about 3.5% enrichment. Still a lot of value in that fuel. But you can't use it anymore for the reactor. And that has more radioactivity, so that spent fuel is called high-level waste. Then you have low-level waste. Low-level waste is things like rags or tools or waste materials when you were doing maintenance on the plant. There's a much lower human health concern there. In the US, we used to be very concerned about nuclear waste, and in fact, it was one of the main barriers in thinking about the expansion of new nuclear power plants. Or people said that we should close existing nuclear power plants because we hadn't solved the waste issue. That's been mostly put to bed in the US for about the past 7 or 8 years. Very few people in the US talk about nuclear waste anymore. And it's because we have the same solution that Taiwan can use now, and that's called interim storage. Dry cask storage of spent fuel. It's very simple. The fuel rods, when they're depleted, cool for longer in a spent fuel pool next to the reactor, and then you store it on site in basically large drums encased in concrete, just in air, once they've cooled down enough. It seems simple. You don't have to move it. You don't have to move it to a new place where people don't want it. You keep it at the plant where the economic activity is still happening. And better yet, if you extend the license of that plant, we've extended the license of 100 plants, not just to 40 to 60 years, but 60 to 80 years as well now in the US. We have 12 plants that have gone to 80 years. There's no reason Taiwan's plants can't go to 80 years. Then it stays there. That's a 50 or 100-year solution at least. It will be safe. You still want to think about long-term waste? You have 100 years to figure it out. And we're all figuring it out together. So that's the situation in the US, and it's gone from being probably one of the most important public perception issues to almost an afterthought, so much so that I almost didn't even say it in my initial remarks.
So anything, really, Karen, you want to ask or Professor Wu, Professor Chiu? So Professor Chiu, you have anything you want?
Response, because we know the United States is huge, big, right? I mean, got a lot of space to store those waste. But in Taiwan, it's quite a different issue here. I believe you guys know the effect called NIMBY, not in my backyard effect, right? So, and also Taiwan is a democracy, is an electoral, politics. So a lot of politicians, they have to face this challenge from their electorates about, why do you want to put this waste in my backyard? So, I mean, give us more specific example about the United States dynamic out there in this regard.
On waste, we can go deep on that. So again, in the US, we're doing dry cask storage at all of our nuclear power plants. The ones that are operating, and by the way, the ones that aren't operating either, you still haven't solved the waste problem if you shut down the nuclear power plant. You just don't make any money from the plant anymore. You still have all the waste that you had for 40 years. We store it on site. And importantly, we keep it at the plant where it was produced. We don't try to force it off into some other community. Even in the US, it's hard to find a place. We've tried it. We've tried to have interim waste storage facilities in the desert in the American Southwest. Even there, it's hard to justify. Actually, we do have interim storage facilities because we also have a nuclear weapons program. It's a whole other supply chain. But for power plants, we've said, no, we're just going to keep it for now. And maybe we'll find an interim site that can be good for 200 years. It'd be nice to kind of have it together in one place. You could have a little better security. But no, we keep it at the plant because the plant is where it was produced. The plant is where you already have safety systems in place. The plant is monitored, and the plant is well characterized from seismic and other perspectives. And the plant can make money. And that's important for the politics. Actually, in the United States, do you know the people who love nuclear power the most? The people who live right next to the plant. You know how many people work in a natural gas power plant? About 30 people. You need about 800 people in the same nuclear power plant. It's a great source of jobs and a great source of economic activity in the US. And the towns that they're in, whether it's larger towns or smaller towns, they love it the most. The people who don't like it as much tend to actually not be right there. They tend to understand it less, and they're farther away. So there's a little bit of a political game there. But if you see, for example, in the US administration and past administrations, we've always been concerned, our administration can be pro-nuclear power, anti-nuclear power. And sometimes presidents like nuclear, sometimes they don't. But you know who's nuclear's greatest champion in the US? It's Congress. Because the plants are popular in the communities that they're in. So that's the dynamic that we have. And back to the original point, if the plants are operating with the waste alongside them, that's the best situation you can have. Because you're getting the best of both worlds.
Yes, please. Could I answer? Yes,
yeah.
please.
可以回答，我用英语回答。But so great question. I mean, it's important to think about it's important to think about the impacts of different risks in building nuclear. The promise of nuclear is to be safe. That is the most important thing about nuclear power. And so understanding the risks are paramount. Taiwan, again, is not alone in seismic risks, in the risk of earthquake for nuclear power. As you mentioned, Diablo Canyon, where we live in California, was many people were concerned about earthquake risk in that, and that was used as a reason not to extend that license, and the governor of California decided to close Diablo Canyon because of concerns about new faults that may have been found. He changed his mind. And he changed his mind because we had a series of rolling blackouts in California. We did not have enough power. We could not build renewable power fast enough, as fast as we thought in California. And so we had to have blackouts. And people die in blackouts. It's not just uncomfortable. People die. There are risks of any energy production. There are risks from coal. I guarantee you that people in Taiwan are dying from coal plants today. We have risks even from gas. We have risks even from renewables. People fall off wind turbines when they're servicing them. Deaths per kilowatt hour on average. Nuclear is the lowest of any form of energy. But it is important to think about those risks. I think a good model for Taiwan as you think about risks in restarting your plants and in fuel storage is look to Japan. People say, oh, but Japan has had issues. Japan actually has many large earthquakes just like Taiwan does, and engineers around it and has good thoughts about how to do so safely. I used to live in Japan. Often I'd be sitting at my desk and things would start shaking. Nuclear plants, no one cared. Nuclear plants trip offline, inspect, and come back online. And there are ways to work with partners to deal with these issues in a pragmatic and responsible way, but I appreciate your concern about these risks. Taiwan's not alone in thinking about those.
这样子哈，那个时间到了哈，我们导播是不是一直在告诉我时间到了呢哈？那个今天的讨论啊，真的是非常的精彩。对不起啊，那个邱教授好像跟上面那一场有相同等级的那个热烈程度呢哈。那我想我就宣布今天的这个这一场啊，就在这里结束。其实我自己都还有10个问题要请教他们的，都还没有机会可以请教呢哈。那以后这个希望 Nownews 能够在那个有机会的话，再请一样的这些重量级的这个学者啊来跟我们讨论。我想今天大家对能源这个问题啊有这么深度的讨论啊，我觉得是非常我自己是第一次参加的这个讨论啊，能够有这么深入的见解了哈。所以谢谢大家。I want to announce the conclusion of this session, and I want to thank each and every one of you. I think we all learn lots from you, and there are many questions. I myself still have many questions I want to ask you. Of course, audience will have much more questions, but I think during the discussion, we all have much better understanding on these energy issues, particularly the nuclear issues, which is a major concern in this society. So I want to thank you all, and I wish you all the best in your way back home. Thank you very much. 谢谢。Thank you.